Here is an unfortunate occurrence. Check out the bark of my Japanese larch here. Well, there is no bark until you get down here. This whole section in the middle here has all of the bark removed on all sides of the tree, it looks like. And that is almost certainly as a result of a male deer rubbing its antlers on the tree. So pretty annoying, and obviously that will kill the tree because it has been completely girded on all sides. So I will be replacing my Japanese larch and ending the Japanese larch experiment here. But there's more deer damage to take a look at. Here we have eastern white pine, Pinus strobus, and they've eaten basically the end off this branch here. And in a few other spots you can clearly see where the deer have eaten the tips of the branches. We had some snow recently, and I guess they kind of started starving maybe because there was no way to get the food on the ground, started freaking out, and ate some pine tree instead. But the good news is that the leader was not affected. There's next year's buds, safe and sound at the top, so it will continue to grow upward, but it is interesting to see they did that. And the male deer did try to brush against this one a little bit, I guess. Well, maybe that's a deer eating as well, who knows. But anyway, pretty annoying, almost on all sides at the back here. Now what else? Next to that we have the Japanese plum yew. And if you read anything online about Japanese plum yew, this is Cephalotexus harringtonia, it'll tell you that it's strongly deer resistant, which I believe it actually is, because for the most part, even though I know there's been a ton of deer activity in this area, there's not really much damage, except if you look down here, this one was eaten a little bit. Let's see, they didn't touch this one. And I think there's one more bite somewhere that they took. No, not much. Not seeing much. So, oh, there it is. Right there. So it looks like maybe they took just a nibble and decided it wasn't worth the risk and left the rest of it alone. So the Japanese plum yew is still holding strong back here in a partially shady location. Lots of shade, actually. And you can see there's still a little bit of snow left on the ground, even a week after the snowstorm. It's been pretty cold here. So field-tested Japanese plum yew, holding up pretty good, especially when compared to the eastern white pine, which was pretty badly devoured. As a comparison, in this exact same area where deer have been hanging out, there's a couple Norway spruces here, and I couldn't find a single place where the Norway spruces, well, maybe there's one. This spot right here. Looks like they took one or a few bites of Norway spruce in this spot and mostly gave up, looks like. I don't really see any others. And then also, interestingly, back here on the blue Atlas cedar, they took one or a couple bites, and I can see there's a twig laying on the ground, so they didn't even bother chewing that one because it was so spiky. So the blue Atlas cedar has defended itself from the deer, but there's another problem, and that is, while I was back here inspecting deer damage, I noticed there's already yellow-bellied sapsucker woodpecker damage on the blue Atlas cedar. And I know I've shown this in videos before, but in this part of the country, in Tennessee, there are some large specimens of blue Atlas cedar, but they almost all have a ton of sapsucker damage. The good news is it appears to only go halfway around the tree, so I'm hoping the tree can somewhat recover, but that will be a little bit of a setback for the blue Atlas cedar. Interesting that it started when it's this age. I would say that diameter is maybe 2 inches diameter on the trunk there. So I don't know what that is in centimeters, maybe 6 centimeters, maybe approaching 7. Anyway, blue Atlas cedar, great tree, but it is susceptible to woodpecker damage. And I don't know if they do that on other trees, and I just don't notice because the trunks are not as visible as the trunk of the blue atlas, it has a very open branching structure, but they definitely do that on the blue atlas. And one more thing to point out about deer damage that is that they did not attack the Virginia pine here, nor did they attack the spruce pine. There's Pinus glabra here, and Pinus virginiana there, and there's a Korean fir right here in the middle of all of this action. It was also not touched. Now, I did some checking online about deer-resistant trees, and in addition to the Japanese plum yew that I showed you earlier, which is pretty much right at the top of the list, the website sources I looked at also mentioned spruce as being relatively resistant in general, and I think we saw that with the Norway spruce, but there are a few others in my collection that are actually inside the fence that didn't get a chance to be tested, but let's take a look at those real quick and just show you what they look like if you want to think about growing some deer-resistant evergreens. Here we have southern wax myrtle, Myrica cerifera, which has a pretty strong smell, and deer generally avoid things that smell funny or strongly, or if they have a strange texture like fuzzy leaves or spiky like spruces. This is a Japanese Pieris japonica, also known as Andromeda, a kind of a bushy evergreen which can get large over time, and you can see here it's got some red buds that will put out flowers in the spring, but this is reportedly deer resistant. I guess it smells funny to them. This is a Ketaliri cultivar of Chinese juniper, Juniperus chinensis. And in general, junipers are deer resistant. Not only are they spiky, but also have a very strong smell. And here we have the blue ice cultivar of Arizona cypress, Cupressus arizonica, another tree that is somewhat spiky, but also extremely strong smell. And I do have this planted outside of the dog fence, and I haven't seen any evidence that deer have tried to even nibble on it. I guess they can smell from pretty far away that it's strongly scented, and they don't like that. Here's a Prague viburnum, which is also supposed to be deer resistant, and although I don't have one planted outside of my fence, I haven't ever really seen any deer damage on the many viburnums planted in my area, so I think it's a good choice for deer resistance. For the most part, deer will avoid eating all spruces because of the prickly nature, but if you really want to take it up to the next level with the sharpest spruces, regular Norway spruce is fairly sharp, but this is tiger tail spruce, Picea paulata, and it's incredibly stiff needles, very sharp on the end. I don't think that a deer could even attempt to bite this if it wanted to, but there's one more spruce that takes it even further. Although tiger tail spruce that we just looked at is very rare, this one is even more rare, but you never know, you might find it for sale. And this is Chihuahuan spruce, and it's really hard to explain just how sharp the Chihuahuan spruce is, but if you even slightly squeeze it, you're gonna probably draw blood. It's extremely sharp, incredibly tough needles, and once again, I think it's beyond consideration that a deer could even try to eat this. So if you really want to challenge the deer and you think that they can eat anything, try to get them to eat a Chihuahuan spruce. I don't think it's going to happen. Also, it's a pretty interesting spruce, although this particular specimen did lose its leader. You can see right here in the middle. Last growing season, the growing season before, and it's sent up a couple new leaders this year, so I have a little work cut out for me here to try to get a new leader going this spring. Here we have the Momi fir, a Japanese fir, which also has very sharp needles. Usually firs are kind of on the soft side, but not Momi fir. It's actually got 2 prickles on the end of each needle and stiff needles. Actually, the best fir for growing in Tennessee, if you're watching this trying to grow things in the Mid-South, Momi fir is the best. And I do have a little one planted outside of the dog fence, which has not been damaged at all by deer. So it has been field tested. Very tough tree, very heat tolerant, humidity tolerant, clay soil tolerant. The only problem is that it can be damaged by late frost because it wants to break bud early. It'd probably be happier in a climate a little bit more mild than mine, like maybe North Carolina or something. So I've got my work cut out for me here as well. I've got to establish a new leader, as you can see at the top there. After a leader dieback 1 year, there's multiple new potential leaders, and I'm probably going to keep the one on the right and get rid of the ones on the left, but I am going to wait till spring before I do that.